Alrighty, we are live. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Carson. How are you?
Good, good. I just woke up, so I'm a little tired, but I got my coffee, so yeah.
Yeah, nary a bad thing has happened to me this year,
All right.
by which I mean the last 32 minutes.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Greetings.
Um,
I should have said greetings from 2026.
okay, I thought you were 30 minutes away from 2026. So it's 12:30 your time.
I did too, before you went to bed. It's actually 7 hours now. I thought it was 8. I didn't
Oh,
take daylight savings into account. For this part of the year, we're at a 7 hour difference.
gotcha, gotcha. Well, I'm glad nothing bad has happened in the last half hour, so that's good. Okay, yeah, let's get into it. So yeah, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think you have posed these questions on your social media and gotten responses from a number of people, and so I'm on here to give my perspective.
Mhm.
Um, Not sure which you'd like to talk about first, but I think that the issues that are somewhat connected to the trolley problem. One of the main ones was about reversibility, at least as I see it, whether there's any reason not to believe, or whether there's a basic moral, whether the intuition that, as I would put it, if changing A to B is good, then changing B to A is bad by the same amount, um, hold up to scrutiny. That's relevant to the trolley problem, but also, I guess, a thought experiment that's on your mind a lot about creating net happy people, or even extremely happy people that don't interact with already existing people. So
Yeah.
the question of um, uh, whether axiological or valence states, whatever positive and negative states are, whether it makes sense to give moral value to creating beings that didn't previously exist with morally positive or positively valent states, or whether it only ought to apply to already existing beings.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, well, let's go there. So yeah, I think the thing I mentioned to you last was this idea that if we had some random other planet, I think I might have said if it was Mars, but let's ignore Mars because we'll probably go to Mars. But let's say there's this planet in the universe and humans can live there, but for whatever reason, nobody on Earth will ever go there. And then you could just press a button and magically, let's say 100 people show up on that planet, and um, let's ignore a lot of complicated obstacles like if they're going to keep reproducing and making more generations. Let's just say 100 people are going to show up. They're never going to interact with us on Earth. We're never going to interact with them on their planet, and we can even say they're never going to interact with any other beings that could exist in the world if there are any. Those 100 are going to have we'll just call them net positive lives. They're going to have really good lives. It Can you explain to me a reason that it's worth even creating them, especially like compared to the idea of not creating them? Why would it be better to create them than to not to?
The framing of the question is, um, the framing of the question is kind of strange. It's like asking, it's like asking, I don't know what to say that wouldn't be flippant, but if you have a big pile of gold, what would make you believe that you were richer than if you didn't have the pile of gold? I mean, we're talking about the world, and we're talking about something that we grant for the purposes of the, I mean, it's a premise that we regard whatever the condition of beings brought into the world as positive. We're assuming, right, in this thought experiment that the experiences that these beings are going to have are net positive by stipulation. So granted that, you've basically just described a world that we stipulate is a better world. So so your question is a bit perplexing on the first level of my intuition. I would interpret the question in reverse. Why on earth would you stipulate that some change puts something positive into the world without a larger or a correspondingly sized negative, and then not think that change is a morally positive change? Why would you stipulate this positive valence and then deny that the change to that state is a positive change?
I guess I just don't view the idea of someone who doesn't exist existing as a positive thing. I could imagine that if somebody, however we evolved, the feelings we get when we create like our own offspring, that feels like a positive to us. And maybe for you and most people or many people, just the idea of creating people that aren't going to be positive in that personal way is a positive thing. I guess I just don't see it for myself. And the idea of flipping the question makes me think of the idea of explaining why I don't believe in a God. So I've never been convinced that a God exists. So I don't believe in a God, but I don't have like an explanation for like why I think there is no God. I just haven't been convinced of it. So in the same sense, like there's nothing within my mind telling me to think that creating people on this other planet would be a good thing. But maybe this will help explain it as well. And maybe you can branch off of this. I don't have any thought that our species or other species needs to continue either. If I could look into the future and find out 500 years from now that all humans just decided, oh, we don't want to reproduce anymore, we're just going to stop making babies or whatever. Now I have some thoughts on like how beneficial it is for humans to make babies and then have kids and grandkids, and how like fulfilling that can make one's life. But like outside of that being what I assume is the natural state of our species, if they truly didn't want to and they just stopped, I don't have any like sadness about humans not continuing anymore, or any other animal. If the eagle goes extinct, I'm concerned if like we did something unnecessary to cause that to happen, and that maybe we could remedy that. But if they just, let's just say they went extinct in any other way, I don't think like I might think like, oh, it's interesting to see other species. So when I learn about like dinosaurs from prehistory, I go like, oh, those would be interesting to see in real life. But like I don't have any connection to them needing to be here, or the eagle, or humans, or more humans on another planet. So am I just, is there something about my fundamental just intuition that is just different?
I guess clearly something is different between our intuitions and and I don't know, we're products of we like people in general to some degree, but we also the two of us in particular and people who are somewhat like us we're the products of maybe sort of initial intuitions, but then this cyclical process of exposing them to the fire of conversations and academic philosophy and maybe testing out in debate and other formats and then they get refined in different ways. So there's probably some degree to which you and I start with different basic like personality profiles that yield different kind of intuitions, and then we've gone down different paths and sort of had them altered in different ways, to where we still call them intuitions, but it's not, that doesn't imply that they're like they might feel primitive, but they don't they're not historically primitive in terms of how we came about them in our lives, right? They were shaped by the particular people we've talked to and the particular things that we've read, and but I have some thoughts about how to test what you're describing and to see kind of what before arguing about what you ought to hold or something like that, just to probe the psychology. Do you think that if the status quo was the reverse, that the equal and opposite change would similarly have no moral valence? So somehow you can press a button and these beings that are having net positive lives, you don't know the details, but somehow you're assured that they are on Mars. And whether they, even if they continue to exist, neither you nor anybody else here will interact with them significantly. And then you can press the button and it just instantly, painlessly makes them all disappear. Do you regard that as just sort of putting a negative sign in front of the change that would make them exist now from out of non-existence? So if that's worth 0, if the moral change there is 0 to push a button that makes these happy beings exist, then -0 is 0. Do you think that pressing a button that would make them instantly disappear would similarly be not bad at all?
No. So I think the only thing that I can think of that makes me think taking one's life is immoral is the idea that they want to exist. And so I think once something exists and wants to exist, that removing it would be bad. But there's no opposite that I can think of. There's no idea of something that doesn't exist wanting to exist. And maybe if there was some magical thing that is like it's nothing, but somehow it wants to exist, then I would have, I don't know if it'd be a moral obligation, but maybe I would view it as beneficial to make that nothing exist because it wants to. I don't know, because like I've never cared about something being made to be a certain way or helped in any way unless it's a sentient being. And so the idea of helping nothing become a sentient being just that it just doesn't compute with me. Like the only time I've ever thought of that concept was the the intuition to create a child and start a family or whatever. But that feels different to me, to create my own child that I plan on, um, you know, raising and having part of my life versus the idea of just being a person that can press a magical button and create children that I won't raise. The only way I can imagine being at this point, the only way I can imagine accidentally convincing myself, which I haven't done, would be if we somehow made it somehow connected to the idea of me creating my own offspring, but just 10 or 100 of them or millions of them on another planet. And do I care if I'm connected to my own offspring? But yeah, as far as the thing that you said, yeah, I just I wouldn't want to remove, unless I thought of a good reason, I wouldn't want to remove lives that already exist.
Mhm. So I think this superficially somewhat simple seeming moral question is embedding a lot of ideas about um, personhood and consciousness and time and causality that they're playing a role, whether implicit or explicit, in different people's intuitions. So I wonder whether you think it's reasonable to talk about having preferences over the past. I might say, colloquially, I wouldn't say I wish that I had existed last year, but I could say I'm glad that I existed last year. I'm glad that I was there in that particular place to to help somebody or to experience something or whatever. I have preferences in that would be expressed normally not as wishing or desiring, but as being glad or being upset that I existed at particular points in the past.
Mhm.
So
Well,
that would somewhat suggest that somebody who would exist at a future state can have the kind of thing that you're proposing is necessary to make an act of toggling their existence morally relevant, right?
hmm.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah, no, it
so
does. So
so if a person wanting to exist on the following day is a good reason, not a good reason to disvalue instantly killing them, then wouldn't the preferences of the person you have the possibility to create, being glad that they were created, be able to justify or give positive valence to the act of creating them?
no, I don't think so. I mean, okay, so I'm not an expert on the theories of evolution, but it seems to me that that species of sentient being, well, I guess it wouldn't even just be sentient beings. Any well, anyways,
Well,
we'll just talk about sentient beings.
why are we talking about evolution?
Well, I was just going to point out that not that this part matters exactly, but that we have. I would guess that any animals that evolved that have no like desire to continue living or want to live or whatever, they just will walk off cliffs and not continue. So the ones that want to
Well,
continue want to continue, but something that hasn't created has no want to continue. But I agree with you that I can imagine right now that similar to all living humans, that aside from the ones on their way to commit suicide right now, that all humans have this desire to live. So if we talk about a hypothetical 100 people we could create on another planet, or one that I could create now.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. You're misunderstanding me, I think.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
not talking about evolutionary motivation. That the preference could be caused by anything.
I'm just recognizing that these people I could press a button and create, I can know that those people want to live, and therefore if let's say I was holding my hand above the button and I was thinking about it, having this conversation with you, and if you convinced me, I'd press the button to make the 100 exist on the planet.
Okay,
well, hold on. This is very important. I think this is very important. If this whole conversation we were having was based on this button that I could press and make 100 people on the planet, and I have my hand here and I'm waiting for you to convince me, and let's imagine that you never will. If somebody runs in the room and pushes my hand on the button and makes them appear, the second they appear, even though I didn't want it, I would not remove those people. I want those people to continue existing because
you answered that question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just thought that might be worth mentioning.
Yeah, I've heard your answer to that question, and
so knowing that those people would want to exist, that doesn't make me want to create them. I thought that's what you were asking me.
Okay, so I'm asking you why. I'm trying to probe your, to me, extremely counterintuitive of asymmetry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking you if these people existing on Wednesday telling you we have preferences to exist on Thursday,
mm-hmm,
is a good moral reason not to make them not exist on Thursday,
mm-hmm,
then where would the asymmetry come from? That knowing that beings right now that don't exist on Tuesday, on Thursday, having been created, they will say, we are glad that we existed on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. That preference is not a justification for, is not a good moral reason to bring them into existence on Wednesday. Why? Given that we can apparently have preference-like attitudes over the past states.
mm-hmm.
What is it about that kind of preference?
Yeah, I can't think of
that kind of later in time a preference for having been created that you don't accept as giving moral reason to create such beings.
Yeah, I can't think of an answer really, other than I just I don't think that there's a reason to if they don't exist, because the reason that I'm caring has not existed yet, hasn't been created yet. That's the only thing I can really think of. If you could take this rock and magically turn it into a person, I don't care about the rock until it's a person. If somebody turned it into a person, sure, but I just don't. The idea of creating a person just doesn't.
When a baby grows through stages of childhood and adolescence and to adulthood, and then continues to refine their personality as an adult, do they have to change sufficiently slowly? Do they have to retain enough of the similar preferences, similar pleasures and pains and personality traits of the infant in order to have the coming into existence of the older child and adolescent and adult be potentially positive? Because that's what I was saying earlier. There are these beliefs about personhood and consciousness and their temporal relations that that are hiding inside this ethical question of whether there can be moral value to bringing into existence. Does the goodness of this kind of self state I am now, having come into being, does that depend upon like how similar I am to myself at 5 years old? So, I mean, let's say there's 5-year-old Jeremy, and there's some kind of intervention that's gonna toggle like a happier middle-aged Jeremy or less happy one. And you're gonna say, well, it's good to press the button that makes the happier middle-aged Jeremy instead of the unhappy middle-aged Jeremy because the 5-year-old Jeremy exists. So does it then matter that both potential middle-aged Jeremys are like really strongly similar to 5-year-old Jeremy?
No.
Or does it require some kind of like unchanging like pure soul ego kind of concept that I am the same as that 5-year-old, like this kind of identity, like pure identity core kind of conception of personhood? Because let's say, okay, so Star Trek transporter kind of technology, right? And 5-year-old Jeremy is just going to be annihilated, and then the information is somehow going to be preserved and then kind of split, and then the button is going to hold like the rest of the course of my life, right, through adolescence and adulthood to today. And there's this very positive trajectory and then this very negative trajectory. And what you said here, like your core intuition seems to say that if that 5-year-old had never existed at the time of your decision, then just creating that happy middle-aged Jeremy out of nothing wouldn't be good. But given that 5-year-old exists, doing something that makes him quote unquote grow up into happy middle-aged person is good, and doing something that makes him grow up into miserable middle-aged person is bad. And it hinges on the prior existence of that kid.
Mm-hmm.
How much is this meant to depend upon like some metaphysical sense in which the different middle-aged states are the same person?
Yeah,
because I'm not sure that I am the same person. It seemed just like a conventional way of talking to use the same name.
It's not even that you're the same person. Identity. It's not even the same person. It's that you already exist and that you currently exist as that kid. So if as that kid you had some deep level of depression that made you like end your life or whatever, I wouldn't want middle-aged happy Jeremy because that kid decided not to be around anymore and is gone. So that's my first thought to what you just said. But really quickly, so there's two elements. The reason that I have any moral value on that kid continuing and becoming happy middle-aged Jeremy, is because the desire to. So a being that exists that can desires to continue. And then the only reason I can think of when I strip it down to why I even care about that at all is because I desire to. I like to think that if I somehow didn't, I could still recognize the good in somebody desiring to. But either way, I do. And so, like, when I think of the importance, like, the why this person shouldn't, like, if somebody like presses a button and ends somebody's existence, I don't view it as much of a moral thing really happening because nobody's suffering, there's no pain. The only thing is a life of a person that wanted to continue was prevented from it. And I know how much I don't want that right now. I can recognize that if I was taken out, I wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
think about it. Therefore, I wouldn't care. But since I do care, then I care for everybody in that thought. And that's about it. Once somebody doesn't want to, I don't have any strong desire to convince them to. I just feel bad for the people around them that will be sad that they're gone.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with people saying these sorts of things. I've read some philosophers who who defend this
Oh, I'm not
um,
alone. Okay, that's good.
lack of, well, it's close to Benatar's asymmetry argument that underlies his, what I think is his the most interesting of his arguments for antinatalism. Is the idea that the non-existence of positively valent states is not bad. That's where his asymmetry hinges on. This is either intuition or arguments from other intuitions that um, it's bad when some kind of pain or some kind of negative experience exists, and it's good when some kind of positive experience exists, but it's also good when a bad experience doesn't exist. So the absence of pain being brought into existence is a good thing. It's good that people aren't pressing buttons that bring suffering beings into existence. This is the argument. But the asymmetry lies in the intuition that it's not bad that people are not pressing buttons to bring positively valence experience into existence. So the pithy way is the absence of pain is good, but the absence of pleasure is not bad.
Yeah. And I think that's because pleasure is only good if you can feel it.
Well, you're trying to explain something as if we agree on it, and I very much don't agree. I think that's
yeah, for
that's
sure.
a complete, like almost ludicrously in like unreasonable intuition to have.
Yeah.
The lack of symmetry there, it just seems to I mean, it's not only against my intuitions on sort of the first level that I like when there are more net happy beings around, and I think it's good that they're in the world. But then when the sort of meta intuitions I have about how different like normative views ought to be logically related to one another, the like non-reversibility of different changes of states seems far more implausible to me than the intuitions that Benatar seems to be using. So and it seems to not hold up to like sophisticated understanding of personhood and the way self states are related across time. So you're talking about you talked about a child ceasing to exist, and then you wouldn't want the happy older version of quote unquote the same person to exist after that. So I think let me try to illustrate how strange I think this is, given how I, at least now and for several years at least, have thought about personhood. So let's say there's this teenager who has taken some pills and fallen unconscious. Okay, it's suicide attempt, right? And and you have somebody who can inject some drug that's gonna counter this poison, right? And make this person wake up the next day. And then we're just going to assume in both of these cases that like the overall course of life of this person is going to be positive, significantly positive, right? So somebody does the intervention where this unconscious from overdosing on pills person gets this injection and then becomes conscious the next morning and then lives 80 more years, right? Of like significant net happiness. Then you have this other intervention where the teenager dies, and then one day afterward, necromancer cast the spell that brings that one day older teenager into existence, who then lives out their life. It just seems utterly, I mean, aside from the fact that we don't have that that kind of necromancy is not part of our technology, like the way it is in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign world, right? It seems just extremely unjustified to me to think that there's a huge categorical difference between those two cases. In the two cases, I mean, well, do you think that there is a huge categorical difference between these two cases?
I might have missed something, because I don't think I do, and I don't,
So
but I think I must have missed
then
something
here's
from
how
the
it relates
beginning.
to how I interpreted your claim. Okay, so so I'm interpreting your claim earlier about the 5-year-old had died, and so you don't care if you won't assign positive value to pressing a button that brings happy middle-aged version into existence. So what I'm hearing is that it matters whether, in some metaphysical sense, the teenager who's passed out and their body's on their way to dying from the pills, quote unquote, exists right now, and I'm quote unquote saving the existing person, versus saying metaphysically the teenager doesn't exist now, is dead now, is a non-person now, and I'm intervening to quote unquote create one day older version of person from a non-existent person.
Yeah.
And
So
add person into the world who is not in the world now on the following day through necromancy. And then
Yeah.
and you seem to be claiming the position that the first version of injecting the drug that counters the poison is a positive good because the person you're doing it to exists. And in the second case of the necromancy, is not good at all. It's not in your saying you took, at least with the people on Mars, you took the position that they don't exist yet. It's not good at all.
Yeah. So the drug,
Despite the fact that from the next day throughout the following 80 years of life, in both cases you're changing the world from all those happy 80 years, the exact same happy 80 years, not being in the world to being in the world.
yeah. So I think that maybe the misunderstanding is that you thought I was viewing the drug in the first one as good. I'm not necessarily viewing it as good, or the necromancy one, and I'm potentially viewing both as good. And here I'll explain why with something slightly separate, and then I'll get back into it. So if somebody if some kid, like a teenager, was like having fun running around, they run out of this store with their friend and they're just not thinking straight, and they run into the street, but they're just like goofing around, and they aren't trying to end their life, and they're about to get hit by a car. Because I value the idea of wanting to continue, and this person wants to continue, I would want to push him out of the way of the car, even though he accidentally did it. Now, if another kid the same age stepped in front of a car to end their life, but they did it for a misunderstanding, so if they truly wanted to end their life, I'm fine with it, end their life. But if they did it Romeo and Juliet style, they did it because the only reason they wanted to end it was a misunderstanding. And if they knew that information they wouldn't want to, then sure, I would want to save them just like the other person. So with the necromancy and
So I think we need to modify this thought experiment then, because there's something getting entangled here that it's not going to shed light if this remains entangled, right?
Okay.
This is getting entangled with a deontological question of, should you respect somebody's wish or whatever, respect somebody's agency in a deliberate suicide, right? That's I want to disentangle it from that. We're talking about whether there's good to bringing positive experiences into the world without the person that they're going to happen to already existing. Okay, that's the key question right here, that we started with. So I have to modify it then if your intuition is going to get entangled with the fact that this teenager like chose to take the pills. Okay, so I want to so just change it to like an illness. Okay, not even an accident. Okay, you're just changing it to somebody who's on the verge of death, just their heart stopped. And you have like the doctor's intuition, or the doctor's intervention that makes the heart start again after like having stopped for a couple minutes or something. And then there's 80 years of net happy life, right? Net positive existence versus the necromancer. So
I view both as fine. Both as good. If the person in both scenarios wanted to live
more or less identically good.
Identically good. Yeah, I think so. Because I thought of this as a challenge yesterday when I was pondering something you had said similarly. I wasn't sure if somebody just died of like an illness, would I want to bring them back? And I think so. I think if I could snap my fingers, I'm not too familiar with the necromancy thing, but yeah, just they're out of existence, and can I bring them back? Because they've already existed, and because they have that thought process I have of wanting to exist, I would either give them the medicine or I would bring them back. Sure.
Okay, so it can it can jump across a gap of
Mhm.
of the person that needs to exist to hold the experience for the creation of the experience to be positive. That thing can jump over a
Mm.
gap of that person not existing.
Yeah. Which
Okay,
which is
so it
fun
can
because
jump
you
over a
saying
gap.
that
Okay.
real quick, then it brings up the question of if I could magically snap my fingers and anybody that's died in history, could I make them not dead anymore and exist right now? That's a big fat maybe, but it's more complicated. So yeah, it's a
So
big gap.
yeah, that was one place I was gonna go is these people on Mars, um they existed a million years ago. On like
Sure.
in a different galaxy.
Yeah, so
Um
the complicated thing would
Now
be
it's
if I
amazingly good to bring them back on Mars,
yeah, it just
knowing
depends.
that
Like
they'll be
so
happy.
so if they already and again, this is a new thought to me. My intuition told me initially I wasn't going to bring them back, but after I thought about it, I decided I would. Now, in this case where depending on the amount of time later, how different their environment is, how they're going to live. Yeah, but I mean, since we have it baked into the hypothetical that
Okay.
bringing back people from however long ago, they're going to have net positive lives.
Mhm.
Um,
That's assumed,
then
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Then
Now and now
I
it so
don't see
now
why
it
not.
goes from you see no reason to care about it at all. It's just a zero on the moral valence to now it's amazingly good. Amazingly good.
Amazingly good. I don't think it's I mean, I don't
Well, they're
know.
gonna
Maybe.
have they're gonna have like it's a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
Having like significantly net positive lives by stipulation, right? So
Yeah,
then
the amount doesn't matter.
okay,
Similarly, if I
so let's start by this because I said enormously good.
Mhm.
People existing having happy lives on Mars now, there's a catastrophe that's about to annihilate them, and you can
Mhm.
do something to stop it. That's enormously good, right?
Again, I don't know about enormously good. I would stop it in the sense that I'd want somebody to do the same for me. Yeah.
It's not enormously good if there are a billion people and you can stop the nuclear bomb that's going to annihilate all of their happy lives. That's not
I mean,
enormously good.
maybe it's just that I always compare things to other things. I would say preventing them from immense suffering would be immensely good.
Oh,
Whereas
oh,
preventing non-existence, yeah, I like. I put it as pretty darn good. I guess I just haven't thought about it much. We'll just call it, yeah, really good.
okay. I don't want to. I don't want to entangle too many things, right? I don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
entangle
Yeah,
suffering versus the denial of you know of many preferences to
yeah.
continue existing, right?
Yeah, beings that
Um,
want to continue existing, me helping them continue existing, especially if they're going to have net positive lives and not be upset that I help them continue existing. Yes, that is very good, I think.
okay, so but you said earlier that if there's a 5-year-old who's died,
Mhm.
that you don't see any positive value in
Mm.
bringing happy middle-aged person into existence.
Okay, so here it's a yes and a no. So that 5-year-old, if I could find out, like if I could magically know that if I brought them back to show them like how great their lives would be and that they took their life on a misunderstanding, or if they could have seen their whole life, they would have gone like, "Oh yeah, I will continue this." Then yes, I would bring them back.
Uh-huh.
It if I were to bring them back and they were gonna like suffer for 10 years, but then have great middle-aged whatever, like you were
Mhm.
talking about, and so on, and they could look at it all and think like, "Oh, I don't want this life, even though it will be net positive. I still don't want it." That's what I'd base it on. I'm just basing it on if somebody wants to continue, I would love to help them continue, and if they don't
Uh-huh.
want to continue, then I don't care.
Give me just a second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom and then I know what I'm gonna say. and I come
Yeah,
back.
you're fine. I'm gonna fill up my coffee. I'll be right back.
Right on.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions, and when I'm asking you like about what your intuitions are like about this, uh, I hope you understand that I'm trying to illustrate how convoluted I think this sort of approach to the question is relative to the very straightforward alternative account that I hold. So if I have a ecstatic day tomorrow, or today, hey, it's only 1:24 a.m. If I have an ecstatic January 1st, how much continuity of personhood and continuity of preference is supposed to be required to make that a good thing to have come into the world? So I need to be existing now as a person in order to make that experience of an ecstatic day tomorrow be moral net positive rather than neutral. If I had not been existing now and some kind of magic made Jeremy Goard later in the day on January 1st appear into existence having ecstatic or whatever wonderful positive experiences, would not be a good thing, would not be a good change in the world.
Comparatively,
it depends upon me being a person existing now that can be filled with that positive experience for that positive experience to be good. That's the claim.
No, because what I think is good is if positive experiences and not suffering experiences happen to a being that exists. So if somebody brings you into existence right now, if you never existed and then Jeremy was created to exist right now, January 1st, with net positive life or whatever, you existing, I would rather you have positive things than negative things. And if we did a calculus, then the fact that you were made to exist, it would be better that as many of the people that exist have positive lives, but I don't
So,
see any.
yeah.
I
Yes.
do see. I do see it good as you existing in the sense that I love your company and I like talking to you. But outside of me interacting with you,
I get
the
it. I got that.
creation. Okay, yeah.
I got that. But you seem to be saying that rest of the day, January 1st, Jeremy Goard having ecstatic experiences would have zero positive value if Jeremy as a person had not existed prior to that.
No, I'm saying
Self-state coming to
I'm
existence.
saying it's equally the same. Whether you started out
Yeah, so
as
zero net change. There's nothing better about that person having amazingly net positive experiences, having them, if a prior person had not existed. So right now, I exist. I'm a vessel on the metaphor that can be filled by positive experiences.
Yeah.
This year.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that those positive experiences can now be, there's something good about them, but there's not anything bad about, and it would be bad. It would be bad for those not to happen, because I'm a person prior to that change. But isn't your position like Benatar's that there would be nothing bad about those pleasures, those whatever positive experiences? It can be lots of things other than pleasure, good relationships, other things. There's nothing bad about them not existing if I don't exist as the vessel to be filled with them right now.
Correct.
Ahead of them.
Yeah, correct. But the idea of them just like floating in the air that could have gone into your vessel, my thought is I wish I could make those go to the other people that already exist. But
so
just because I want as much positive, yeah.
How much connection of personhood does there have to be?
Okay. Yeah, and maybe I'm misunderstanding something. How much connection of personhood? There just has to be there has to be a human that wants to exist, and that's it. So I don't know. I don't know.
Only human. Okay.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. There has to be something that can want to exist that wants to exist.
So I asked about how strong the connection of personal identity needs to be. So if I have profound amnesia when I go to sleep tonight, and then wake up like not knowing my name or like details about where I am, but then I end up having a super wonderful, ecstatic, happiness filled day in that first amnesic day. Is that enough of a connection of personhood to make the happy day coming into existence
I don't see any connection with personhood. So you either have to A, want to exist, or B, be given a reasonable amount of information to make a decision of if you think you would want to exist based on that information. So if you wake up from with amnesia or whatever, and and you're human that can't tell me you want to exist, and then I can tell you, oh, this thing happened to you, and you told me before you want to exist, but now you can't recognize that, and I give you this information so you can say, oh, based off this knowledge that I can't think of right now, I guess I would want to exist. So one of those two things taking place would make me want you to continue to exist. Only because you want to.
Why would it still be, quote unquote, the same me that this prior existence talking right now has the capacity to like give license to the positive value of the happiness of somebody who doesn't remember the name that I'm using right now. That's what I'm asking. What is this thread supposed to be that I, calling myself Jeremy Goard right now with these memories, need to be in order for it to be good that post amnesia guy experiences great happiness rather than like flat boredom?
Yeah, I mean,
my intuition is very overwhelmingly that that post amnesia entity having enormous net happiness is good.
Yeah.
Relative to baseline, like flat affect or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, well, with you existing, I think that the pleasure is good. So there's that. I think that's clear.
And what's the difference between post amnesia Jeremy's potential large happiness being much better than flat valenced experience? What's the difference between that and magic spell that makes middle-aged guy come into existence with large net happiness be much better than not doing that?
Well, I'm not. Yeah. I don't know if I'm fully understanding it because I'm not making the amnesia Jeremy
So
exist.
there's two kind of ways that a very structurally similar, adult human can experience immensely net positive experiences. One of them is called post amnesia Jeremy, although he's not calling himself Jeremy. And the other one is called magic spell brought new person into existence. I have intuition that those are fundamentally similar and similarly positive, and you're claiming that they're radically different.
I don't know if
it seems like you are.
I don't know if they're radically different. Maybe I don't understand what.
Seems like your whole claim that they're radically different.
I mean, they're radically different in the sense that one seems to be a continuation of a person that already existed, versus one is an option of bringing somebody in. Once they are there, they aren't radically different.
I understand that you think that,
but the action
you also
getting amnesia and coming to is radically different than the idea of pressing a button and making a new person exist. Yes, correct.
That's your belief. Okay. No. What difference is so strong that it can justify such a strong difference in moral judgment about the two cases?
I think before I answer that and have you repeat that question, I think I figured something out here. If I knew, and let's say this wasn't a friend of mine, but if I knew a person was going to go into a coma, have amnesia, come out of the coma, and essentially be an entirely new person, they will never get those memories back. It'll be almost as if they never existed. And let's imagine that they're not going to affect other humans at all. Like all your friends and family are all, you don't have any friends and family. This was like a homeless person or something. And somebody said like, hey, you get to decide, do you bring this person back? With that information, I'd go like, no, why? They're going to have net positive life, pleasure, all the stuff. I'd press the no button. Because it's not you.
It's better that organism dies
It's not better that they die. I'm just not going to create them. Me hitting yes, I feel like is creating them based off what you're saying.
Well,
If everything within personhood about them just doesn't exist and it's just the same
okay.
vessel. And again, this is just off
No.
the top of my head,
So
but yeah.
this is what I'm asking you. What level of continuity, you know? So they're gonna have the same, let's say, general aptitudes. They're gonna lose their biographical memories. They're not gonna know the name that they had before and the relationships they had before, but they're gonna like have the same skills and the same virtues and the same like general personality type.
Mhm.
Is that enough
Yeah, I mean,
to make
part of me would just want to leave it up to them. If they could know in advance and say, "Yeah, I'd want to continue,"
leave it up
then
to the prior state?
maybe, yeah. Because that's the thing. Like, I don't care about the idea of something that doesn't exist.
Okay. So then yeah, I hear what you're saying. I
Yeah,
hear that you
sorry.
keep saying that. I'm trying to understand what the non-absurd reasons would be to justify saying something like that. Okay, so
what I don't
I
get.
understand that you're saying. I understand that you're saying I care about that. I don't care about this.
Uh-huh.
So, how much of a connection does there have to be between earlier state and later state for happiness of later state to be a positive thing to come into existence? How, because we are not 100% identical to the self states that came at prior times, right?
Mhm.
We change.
Yeah.
Personhood is a bunch of strands of causal connection and similarities like morphing across time, right?
Mm. Yeah.
There
Well,
are
let me branch off that because I this might help as well. Like, yeah, let's say that every human every night that when they go to sleep, they wake up a different person, like a completely different person. We bake it into the hypothetical that we're both satisfied with how different of a person it is.
Mhm.
The idea of ending any given person's life in the middle of the night means nothing to me. If they're going to be a different person, that the person before, the day before, that wanted to continue, that person isn't continuing. So the
Mhm.
next day, it's a whole new
By
brain and whatever.
by
I
how
don't care
much?
about
Okay.
the vessel's existence. I care
Oh,
about the
yeah,
the
I got it.
brain's existence.
I
Yeah.
got it. By how much?
By how much?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
you said that a complete difference
Mhm.
would make the coming into existence of the happy future person not have any value relative to their never coming into existence.
Mhm.
The tiniest little bit of connection to the earlier self state
I
give
don't know
all the value to the happiness of the later self state.
if you essentially if you imagine a new person being born tomorrow, the next day, that we're in new individuals. If instead of people being born, it was just the vessels that already exist will go on forever, and essentially like a new baby, but with the brain of an
Yeah,
adult is being put into them the next day,
yeah.
wipe them out. I have no, not, I only wipe them
Okay,
out in the sense of
I've
don't let
heard
them come
you.
into existence.
I've
Yeah.
heard you.
So
I've
I
heard
don't
you.
know.
Did you hear me?
I I heard you, but I don't know if I fully follow because
Okay.
if there's any connection, don't wipe them out. If there isn't connection, wipe them out.
Every new morning,
Mhm.
the person that wakes up is 1% like causally similar to the person who went to sleep the night before. Is
Mm.
that enough to give positive value to the happiness of the new person? Is the 1% connection enough? And then
Mm.
does that 1% connection give 100% of the positive value to the happiness of the next day?
That's possible. I mean, I want to answer it honestly, and we'd have to
And
break
that's
down what that
intuitive. That kind of thing
1%.
is intuitive
Yeah.
to
We just have
you.
to we just have to break down what that 1% means. And so if that 1% was only within like their facial features or something like that, then no. If we're talking about like personhood, 1% of personhood and what they're we're talking completely within their brain, we would have to break down what that 1% looks like for me to answer honestly.
Yeah.
But
So
probably because I'm only announcing that we can end these vessels' lives if a new human would exist where it's 0%, the brain.
so by new human, you I guess mean some kind of complex like concept of personal identity, self, ego, right?
Yeah, the
Because
mind, a new human mind, completely
okay.
100% different.
So yeah, facial features, that's not going to be enough. That's part of the body that we don't normally continue the mind. But
Mhm.
what about um like personality traits and aptitudes without the declarative memory, without the or I mean without the biographical memory? So not remembering your name or who your family and friends are or whatever, but you basically you keep your your general like emotional dispositions and intellectual strengths and weaknesses and things.
Hmm.
Like is does
My
that
my
does that
lack
give any of the positive value to future
yeah,
self
so
state of you?
my lack of ability to answer this shows me that this is probably the section that I'll need to rewatch and ponder a lot to figure out
Mhm.
how I feel on this. This is probably the most important part of the possibility of me reaching over to your side. And
Yeah,
and I don't
I
know
just
what
want
the
you to.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was just
Um,
gonna say I don't know what the answer is going to be, but it's going
so
to be complicated. Yeah.
this is what I want you to. I'm hoping to plant this understanding of how convoluted this way of thinking um, about the moral valence of positive and negative experiences in the future is. It's not as simple, not even close to as simple as saying, here are the people or here are the beings, if you consider non-human animals and you don't call them people, but you consider them to matter. It's not as simple as saying, here are the existing beings. So now having positive things happen to them is good. Creating new beings with positive experiences is not good until they already exist, and then things can be good. It's not as
Mhm.
simple as saying that because our personhood is fluid. The
Mhm.
degree of connection is not 100%. There are lots of connections where it's close to 100% day to day, but less so year to year, less so decade to decade,
Mhm.
very little on the scale of 5-year-old to 49-year-old. And to have a framework in which the positive value of happiness or other positive experiences for a later self state is tied to the existence of the prior self state, you have to make assumptions about, or it seems like you need to go into some kind of theory of what constitutes a continuity of self, right? And whereas contrast that with this view, I'm not a hedonist. I'm not a classical utilitarian who just says straightforwardly quantity of pleasure and pain is what matters. Because I think like macro experiences, larger compositions of experiences can have complex ways in which they're good or bad. But my view is more or less that whatever the good kind of experiences are, having more of them in the universe is better. Whatever the bad kinds of experiences are, having more of them in the universe is worse. And then talking about persons or selves is sort of derivative of that. I've said I think persons are built out of experiences, not containers of experiences. Persons aren't something that can exist in a metaphysically prior way and then be filled with experiences, some of which are positive, some negative. But persons, like, we are the experiences and the way they're connected. And so I see the value as being the experiences themselves in the flow, right? And so it doesn't matter how strong the connection of personhood is between this 49-year-old and maybe the 89-year-old that's going to exist in 40 years. The 89-year-old having an amazingly happy, fulfilled, satisfied year, 89th year of life, or a miserable one. The goodness or badness of that, in my view, is not going to hinge on what percentage of similarity that 89-year-old has to this 49-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and to me, the easy through line for my perspective is just to see that at all times, if this person wanted to continue living, then I thumbs up that. And so the difference between the 5-year-old and the 89 or 49-year-old or whatever, none of that matters. It's just that for always and ever, when I see this individual, if I ask them, do you want to continue? They're wanting to continue is the part that matters. How different they are over the years and how different their personhood is doesn't matter. But I thought of a good challenge to myself based on you talking about this age thing. And it's something like this. Like, so if I could press a button and make a person come into existence right now, and I tell you I wouldn't do it, and then you were to show me a world where I could, like, kind of like Christmas Carol, I could watch this person like as if they existed and watch their life and go see them at 5, 10, see them at 80 or whatever, and see this great life. And I'm watching this human grow and exist. And then I go back to now. And the question is, do I prevent that thing that I witnessed? And that challenge, essentially, you just gave me 95% of that with talking about old Jeremy or 89-year-old Jeremy. And I don't know. That's really tough to see the existence and then to go back and say, no, don't create it. And so same thing with the 100 people on the hypothetical planet. If I'm forced to watch them exist, even though there's still the option to not have them exist, it might be hard to not have them exist when you witness it. So I don't know how to deal with that exactly.
Yeah, another version is, if you have a situation described to you and you don't know whether what's being described is is somebody who currently exists and is experiencing it, or will, a generation from now. They've yet to be born. Are you able to look at this description and say, well, that sounds good. That's that, that experience or whatever, that life or that stretch of life sounds really good. um, in a way that's detached from your knowledge of whether what's being described is something happening to somebody right now or something that is a contingent future experience. It seems like you could just hear that description and say, oh yeah, that's a really, really good day that's being described.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I just don't know if like that's not something that makes me want that, that person to exist. Like I can read the Harry Potter books and I see that for the most part, even though they go through a lot of turmoil, they're having a good time, they're hanging out with their friends. It seems like good lives. It doesn't mean I want those characters to exist in real life just because if they did, they would have these fun lives and you know. It's the same thing where if I write down like a hypothetical, like fun life right now, just a couple paragraphs of some life, just because it sounds good, I don't think that means that should be brought into existence.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's uncertainty. This is another kind of other factor that like cloud things.
Yeah.
The key question is whether the bringing into existence of positively valent states is morally good, morally positive, then like uncertainty about whether the total states that would be produced is actually net positive. That's a confounding factor, right? We want to abstract away from that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I just I've been meaning to ask this. It's almost the reverse of the questions that you've been asking me. But like, let's say that you could like travel back to like Big Bang time, and then you can know that you're never going to exist. That once you walk away from this hypothetical I'm giving you, you will not be part of this world, but you have an impact on what the world becomes. Now you could either press this button and make the world become what everything from Big Bang to now minus yourself, because you don't get to have any self-interest here. You press the button and then it 100% will just make it what it is, what you know it as. Or you could, let's say, press a button that makes it never exist and then nothing is going to continue as it's going to. And let's say no sentient beings will ever exist. Or you could walk away, and walking away makes it like a 50-50 shot. Like walking away just makes you're like, it might become what it's going to become, or it's not going to. Do you have a strong intuition on which of those you would do? And once you walk away, you just don't exist anymore, no matter what.
Thinking that the last one is better just because it's not my fault or something like that, or just because I didn't have the hubris of making a choice. That's actually I regard as insane.
I didn't view it the same way as like the trolley problem, as if you let it kill the five, you're just not taking part. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, if there's some sort of deontological thing that like I don't have a right to make this decision, so leaving it up to 50-50 is the morally correct, the one that doesn't violate a principle of not killing, which I would do either way, or without causing suffering that I would do by making the first choice, or killing everybody that I would do by making the second choice. So I should just not walk. I should just walk away, and then my hand didn't touch the lever.
Okay, I shouldn't have added that one in there. Fine, there's a button to let it happen.
Yeah, I do really regard that last choice as not just the morally incorrect one or the morally worse one, but just actually insane in
That's fine. I get it. I
in
want to
the
hear
way it
your.
regards like choice and causality.
Fair enough.
And so if you have the choice, then between the two sane choices, you know, there's a very very complex assessment, you know,
Mm,
that I can say in principle is going to depend upon whether the overall course of the ordinary universe is net positive or net negative for the experiences of sentient beings. And it it's doubly complex. It's complex in terms of what I ought to regard as positive and negative kinds of experiences, right? It's not, if you can just say pleasure's good, pain's bad, but those are not simple concepts. It's not
sure.
even clear that there's a singular concept of pleasure, a singular concept of pain. They are words that encompass so many different kinds of experience that
Okay,
that
I'm
might
gonna.
not they might not they might not fall into natural categories, right?
Mhm.
I say this in response to hedonism a lot. So I don't even know that the million or whatever hundreds of things that we call pleasure actually have anything in common or form a natural category um, with each other. So that's complex, and then it's complex knowing how much pleasure and pain there are. Like we there's so many things we don't know about wild animal
Right.
experiences. We don't
So
know
I
many
want to have
different
a.
species of animal if they're having net positive or negative experiences. We don't know that. And then there's uncertainty about the future. You know, what is humanity likely to seed sentient life throughout the galaxy? And then if that happens, is it likely to be like governed by advanced ethical principles that produce massive net happiness, or the opposite?
Yeah.
So
So
with
here's the thing.
all those sorts of things, if it's going to be like clearly net negative, as like right now we're clearly either in the generally net negative universe, that where it's better at the moment of the Big Bang to just not have that ever come into existence. Either that, or we're at this bottleneck getting through the mass hellish torture of non-human animals in factory farms, and the callous treatment of many sentient wild animals, and the horrific attitude towards human suffering.
Mhm.
Either we might be passing through a bottleneck where we get through that, and then we can get into this amazing, Star Trek future utopia where un, unimaginable, really, amounts of happiness are produced and disseminated. Happiness and wisdom and just
Mhm. Well, let me.
ways of being that go far beyond what we can conceive right now.
Okay, let me pause you real quick. I would love to have a conversation where we break down these complexities that you're talking about, and I think that would be fascinating to try to figure out what like a well-reasoned answer to this is. But just for the sake of hypothetical, I'm going to bake in something just so I can get a quick answer from you, and then this will be just a separate topic for the future. But so what I'm going to bake into this hypothetical is that you get to press one of these two buttons, but you only have 30 seconds to choose based off your current intuition just in this moment. And if you don't choose within 30 seconds, then the world will continue as is, but it will be all the pleasure will be stripped and it'll just be pure suffering for everyone. So
Yeah, I'll choose the first one. I have that. It's such a complex question, but when I have to come down on it, I believe that this constructed thing of morality is subject to something called reason, and the overall weight of reasons engaging with reasoners, engaging with one another in ways that are sort of involve liberal norms of communication and standards of justification. I know this is probably taking longer than 30 seconds, but I've already said, yeah,
It was yes to having the world become what it currently is.
I think that the current world is more likely in a bottleneck of the early examples of structures, the structures that we are, the physical structures that constitute the universe looking in on itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think humans were the first time that happened. I think long before the existence of our species, there were animals, our ancestors, and then other animals that aren't our direct ancestors that already had, self-awareness, as many non-human animals do today. I'm very, very convinced of. But whether this is the first time in all of the universe, or whether it's happening many, many times on very distant planets, the universe has developed these certain kinds of physical structures that can look in on themselves, reflect on it. And I think I would judge it more likely. This is why I'm not an antinatalist or ethicist, right? Because that's where those conclusions would lead me if I held the opposite view. I think we're more likely in a bottleneck towards a state of great flourishing.
Okay.
Of beings and societies that are organized around, they're well organized around maximizing positive experiences and minimizing at least extremely negative experiences. And human history, it has all these vile turns in it, but it does seem to be a progression along these lines. And if you think about what people would have been able to imagine 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, was the possible course of history and human social organization and moral reasoning, and especially what animals that existed prior to humans would have been able to relate to. It seems like our concepts, our fundamental concepts, and our sort of moral imagination are progressing, improving, in ways that are often unimaginable to the past. And the current results, it's simultaneously true, for example, that more and more non-human animals are being horrifically tortured in factory farms, especially with the rise of wealth in China. But that increase in the horribly bad thing coexists with a rise of understanding of the sentience of many non-human species and their moral value among more and more thought leaders, and filtering down to more and more people and more conversations about those issues being had, and at a higher level, and more codification of these sorts of expanded circle values into law and into social norms. It looks like the passing through of a bottleneck or birthing pains for a future that gets a step closer to centuries from now, something that would be an unimaginable utopia.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah.
Just
And I think that,
as where we are right now would be an unimaginable utopia to people
the
living in
past.
clams 10,000 years ago.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So real quick, we reached the time we had talked about, and we ended up focusing on the one topic, which is totally fine. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I have a lot to think about. I just wanted to check with you on, do you feel like you're good for 20, 30 more minutes to talk about one other topic? Okay.
Okay. Yes.
I just know that
By the way,
it's a later time for you. Are you drunk
for our
again?
viewers at home who might have seen Jeremy's earlier videos, these are Budweiser Zeros.
I did not know that existed.
I've been completely sober since early June. So it's something over 200 days. Feeling great.
Why did you stop?
I'm so happy that guy stopped, but that guy didn't have any sort of great epiphany or nothing like a rock bottom. Just early summer thought that this is stupid. There have been thoughts like it's wrong as a consequentialist to hurt future self states, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's pretty similar to what we're talking about now. Like I don't know how similar my thoughts are going to be to say 65-year-old dying painfully of liver failure. I don't know how strongly the sense of self is going to be connected, but I know that that's a horrible thing for people to experience, and it's not right for me to strongly increase the chance that it happens to that guy, whether or not I think of that guy as right now as quote unquote being me. You know?
Yeah.
So it's wrong in the same way that it would be wrong to inflict it on somebody else. It is somebody else, right? Anything that
at very least
in the future, I would think that guy was such a fucking asshole for doing that to me.
Fair?
Why didn't he do something better? Anything that the future state would likely think about the past state, it's morally relevant for the past state to do to bring about for the future state.
Yeah, I don't know if it matters that it's
right?
I don't know if it matters that it's somebody else in the sense of how different your personhood will be in the future. It'd probably be something similar to if right now I just got the courage to do something bad to myself by taking like I don't know, a knife and stabbing it into myself, where it's not going to do like permanent harm, but I'm going to have it's going to be painful and I'm going to have a scar. It's probably just about as bad to like stab myself now versus setting up a hidden knife that's going to stab me 20 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just realized there's this Simpsons meme. I don't remember the episode actually, but there's this meme where Homer is like holding a bottle of vodka and I think a jar of mayonnaise. And he says something like well, it's tomorrow, Homer, who's going to be suffering for this. I sure wouldn't want to be that guy.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's a pretty interesting idea of like how we do or don't value the future versus pleasure in the moment. Yeah. Okay, let me get to this next thing real quick, and I'm guessing this will be one that we talk about further when we have more time. But I've brought a couple different hypotheticals to you on this topic, but I'll have a fresh one right now. So
yeah,
there's 8 billion people in the world right now. Do you think it would be better to essentially have everybody get punched in the arm in a way where it'll hurt more than a speck of dust in the eye, like other things we've talked about? All 1 billion or all 8 billion get punched in the arm, or one person loses an arm? And we can imagine, like, let's ignore the idea that like a brand new day old baby punch in the arm might kill them or something. Maybe all 8 billion get the pain of a punch in the arm.
So, are we talking about the principle of whether um, very different experiences can be compared numerically in principle, or are we
Uh,
talking about the particular case and like what the ratio, what I think the ratio is?
oh, so I'm thinking more so that we can recognize that 8 billion punched in the arm, that we both recognize that that is numerically more harm and suffering than the loss
Mhm.
of an arm. And the question is, which one would you choose to have happen if it was going to be
Yeah.
at random?
So you mean by would I choose? You mean which one do I think is the morally better choice?
I think that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, then
After you answer it, I'll let you know if that's what I
yeah,
meant.
it's clearly the morally better choice to have one random person lose an arm than to have every person on earth be punched in the arm. Um,
Can you
I
explain
think,
that? Because my
and
intuition tells me that's
and
completely wrong.
and if that were not the case, then like the way that I could be mistaken is that 8 billion isn't a large enough number to represent the ratio between a punch in the arm and losing an arm. Uh,
Mhm.
and then there would be a number that's larger, you know.
Yeah.
It would be if there were 100 trillion humans in existence
Yeah.
all getting punched in the arm, then maybe that would be worse than one person losing an arm. So but in principle, sure, that they have to be two harms of very different magnitudes have to be numerically comparable. I mean, one way to think about it is transitivity. I mean, this is a very common way that this argument is approached. It's often called the dust specks versus torture um, thought experiment. Um, Transitivity is something that's normally accepted if A is worse than B and B is worse than C, then A is worse than C, right? So
Mhm.
I take it that you don't have a problem with transitivity
Uh,
generally.
yes and no. Like again, I would agree
You
with you
don't think it follows
numerically.
from experience A is worse than experience B, and experience B is worse than experience C, that therefore A must be worse than C?
Depends on if we're talking about individuals or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. For the same, we're not even comparing numbers right now. But
Oh,
then
okay, then
you,
yes.
you for an individual, so you take transitivity and then you go stepwise and you say like what's something that's a little bit worse than a punch in the arm, okay,
Mhm.
uh like a broken pinky finger is worse than a punch in the arm. And then you go like is it better for is it worse for one person to break their pinky finger than for 1,000 people to get punched in the arm?
Mhm.
And you can that now it's practically tractable, right? Now you can think, well, I'm a playground supervisor at an elementary school. Which
Mhm.
would I think warrants higher vigilance, uh, making sure we don't have a playground in which like say 500 students, maybe a normal elementary school population, uh, preventing a school in which like every single student in the school who gets punched in the arm twice a month, every single one, or preventing a case where one student breaks their finger once a month.
Mm.
It seems pretty like intuitively tractable there that you would say that okay, normal like playground supervision is gonna lead to one broken finger a month in the entire student body. But if every single student is getting punched in the arm twice a month, like hard enough to really leave a bruise,
Mm-hmm.
and that intuitively would be a super dysfunctional, like adult supervision of recess. So,
But it's
so you
dysfunctional
get,
for a different reason, I think. Like
but
if we're deciding what would be better to happen, these kids getting punched in the arm, every kid twice a month versus the break, I think clearly you take the punch over the break. But if we're looking at this taking place, then we step back and we look like, what does this mean for how we're teaching and how the supervision is?
yeah. So okay, you
Yeah.
got to stay on topic, right?
Well, it
So
sounded like you were going off topic to it being the separate issue of the supervision.
yeah,
So maybe I misunderstood that.
okay, yeah. So it's my fault then, but we need to. If it's my fault that I introduced some other factor that's not focusing on the key question, that philosophical
Yeah.
question that we're trying to investigate, which is whether numerical comparison can be done across very different levels of harm.
Mhm.
The common way that it's approached is to say, okay, it seems far more of a tractable premise that that 1,000 punches in the arm is worse than one broken pinky finger. And then you go, how many broken pinky fingers is worse than one broken leg? Or if you need you can have another intermediate step, how many broken pinky fingers is worth like one like severe migraine headache or something. And so you can put steps in where it's 1,000 to 1 here, and then 1,000 to 1 here, and then 1,000 to 1 here.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you believe in transitivity, you've gotten 3,000 to 1s is 1 billion to 1. And so if you think 1,000 hard punches in the arm is worse than one broken pinky, 1,000 broken pinkies is worse than one broken leg, and 1,000 broken legs is worse than one amputated arm, which are the kinds of, in terms of 1,000 broken legs versus one amputated arm, that's the kind of decisions that military medics are making, hospital budgets are making, and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Implicitly, not always so, well, never actually so spelled out, because the physical complexity that they're working with is so much larger, so much more complex, right? But implicitly, people are making these sort of 1,000 to 1 trade-offs. Yeah. And then if you were to look at these 3 stages and you accept transitivity, then you end up being led to believe that something like 1,000 hard punch, or rather 1 billion hard punches in the arm is worse than one amputated arm. Yeah. And then if you take that and see that the world population is 8 billion, you should reasonably conclude that one amputated arm is somewhat, roughly like 8 to 1 times less bad than everyone on Earth being punched hard in the arm.
Yeah, and I just think you're completely wrong, and I'd be curious if there's more reason outside of what you just described, because I'm with you on the numbers. So if we just imagine the suffering, like, so it's important in my mind to imagine, like, the suffering of the arm being removed doesn't matter. You can imagine that they're in a coma, or they're knocked out. When they come to, there's zero suffering. It's just the suffering for living an entire life, from at age 20 losing the arm, you live to 80, and it's this lack of this important limb, and then you get that that amount. And whether it's 8 billion punches in the arm, or like you said, if we need to raise the number, we do. And I'm with you. No matter what, whether we get into the trillions or whatever, we can get to a number where the suffering in total is more. So if we imagine the suffering of living a full life without that arm, and we double that in punches. So let's say it's 1 trillion to get a trillion punches. It makes it the same as a loss of arm. It's 2 trillion to make it double. There is no world where I can imagine that it would be reasonable to have somebody lose their arm versus having 2 trillion people get punched hard in the arm, or get the pain of being punched hard in the arm. We have to ignore the idea that old people's arms might break if you punch them in the arm, because again, we're making it double. And so I'm baking it into the hypothetical that the only suffering is double the numerical suffering of pain, not of other nonsense.
I'm going to point to status quo bias right now, and I'm going to suggest that you don't really feel that way, that those sorts of comparisons can exist. This kind of thing only comes out in thought experiments that are so weird that they substantially depart from the status quo. We both, in terms of our personal selfish decisions, constantly weigh the avoidance, the high probability avoidance of small harms over the low probability of very serious harms. We do this when we, ride a bicycle to the store without a helmet. It's a short ride, like the time of going into the closet to get the helmet or whatever, and the awkwardness of, the discomfort of wearing the helmet and the awkwardness of having to hold it inside the store or whatever it is. It's not as bad as dying or being seriously injured, a head injury. Those aren't even close, but the probabilities are also very different. It's like nearly 100% probability of these lower kinds of negative experiences versus, we judge this trip, I'm not going to be on like a busy road or anything. Mm-hmm. So we judge like the risk of that particular bicycle trip to be very low in probability. We do this sort of thing all the time. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the kinds of numbers involved, like realistically, I think you see that they are much less extreme than 8 billion, right? So we're making trade-offs that require much lower thresholds for accepting risk, lower probability of a very bad outcome than the thought experiments. We're already doing it, mm-hmm. right? We're already in our selfish decisions, and then also in what we morally accept in our social institutions.
No, I agree, but I don't see the connection. If somebody makes the choice, a bad choice, based off thinking like, oh, I'm not going to wear this helmet because this isn't a busy street, they get hit. If they could know it, they wouldn't do it. They're just assuming they'd be fine. I don't see the connection.
Well, that's probability, but like probability and demographic statistics are the same thing viewed on different scales. So in your singular life, the difference in probability between feeling the discomfort of wearing that helmet and the much larger badness of getting a head injury if you crash. Scaled up, that's just, how many people die on bicycles every year.
Mhm.
It becomes a statistic when you scale it up to a large population, right?
Mhm.
So in terms of that, we accept a certain number of people drowning in swimming pools traded off against the inconvenience of, pools that with like gates that are harder to get into and more expensive to install, safety devices, or just not having pools on a hot day. We we make these kind of trade-offs that involve very different degrees of benefits and harms.
Mm.
And I think that in very, very many ordinary status quo cases, those trade-offs look like the magnitude there of probabilities or of number of people affected, it looks lower than the ones in the weird thought experiments.
Yeah.
So it
I would
looks to
call
me
that
like, yeah, people are trading off something that's way more than one person having something that's way more than worse than an amputated arm happen to them, like drowning and dying or having their child die in a
Mhm.
swimming pool. What higher numbers of something that's worse, and
Mhm.
we're accepting that to avoid something like a bit more inconvenience on a hot summer day.
Yeah, but I think part of
And that's the status
problem.
quo. It's
Yeah.
accepted because it's the status quo.
I don't think so. In my mind, it's accepted because it's a potential. Now, I know that once it's taken place and we can look at the statistics, that it's not exactly a potential anymore. But the thing you're talking about is a potential. Now, if you say, would you rather have all these pools have these gates or drown this kid? Then I would say have the pools have the gate or whatever. But if you say if we don't have the gates, it's
Yeah,
seeming like
okay.
the likelihood is so. And so maybe that's something that I will be convinced of at some point. I definitely not, am not in this moment. Especially if we make it even more clear. If we say that the numerical harm that we're scaling up is the feeling of a hard punch in the arm, and that feeling lasts 5 minutes. So for every human it happens for, it lasts 5 minutes of that hard pain, and we can still scale that up. So no matter what, we get that to the number. And I even said the trillion versus 2 trillion, so it's double the amount of the suffering of the person without the arm. Like, I don't even care if it's 100 times the amount. If that many humans exist to where you could get 100 times the amount of suffering as the lost arm, that the idea of every human on earth, just me pressing a button, or not every human on earth, but 100 trillion people getting 5 minutes of suffering versus a
Mhm.
human losing their arm.
And
I
then
If you're right, I hope I can be convinced of that someday, because that's fascinating to me.
and then
Like, I
you'd
can't picture
accept
it.
that. You accept that indefinitely, right? Just reiterated,
No,
because
I
that's
don't
the
think I
right thing to
would.
do.
I
Okay,
don't.
so
It would depend on what that would look like and what it would mean. But yeah, if everybody had to be punched with 5 minutes of pain every 10 minutes, that might be a different outcome. I don't know.
okay,
It would
so
depend on the effect on their lives. That's what I'm saying. The effect on one person's life of a missing arm, I don't think you can scale it up to make any number of humans or other animals
yeah,
getting a 5 minute punch in the arm worth it.
that just seems like it's like there's not much to say. Like I don't
Mhm.
think it's simply a matter of different moral values or preferences. It's a manifestation of innumeracy, you know.
Mm.
It I want to say it's that what you just said, it's just a reflection of just an inability to do justice to or appreciate how large certain numbers are.
Hmm.
It's like saying, it's like, having the intuition that the number of permutations of a standard deck of cards couldn't be larger than the number of stars in the observable universe, and
Mm.
then you just say that doesn't feel right. It's just a deck of
Mhm.
cards. How can it have more permutations than stars in the universe? And well, in fact, it's actually many more. you
Mhm.
know it takes something like a 59 card deck maybe to have more permutations than the number of atoms in the observable universe.
Mm.
But still, that would still be a deck you could easily hold in your hand, just like seven more cards.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel right, but it is right.
I agree
That
with you that it might be a thing that I can't comprehend, where if I got enough information or thought about it enough or talked about it enough that I would not be shocked in a sense.
and
That
so there, I
I
would say
accept that
in
there's
general,
information out there I don't know. Yeah.
there are a lot of cases where um, we ought to recognize that our evolved intuitions are not the best tools in our toolkit
Mhm.
to deal with moral questions. Often they are. It's
Yeah.
important to like start with them, and it's important to kind of fit them into the picture. But as we do for other things, as we do for evaluating, permutations of decks of cards and stars in the universe, and as we do for, say, evaluating um, the like health effects of medicines, right? We have better tools in our toolkit. You know, we have explicit reasoning using numbers. We have, for the case of medicine, our methods of scientific testing, double blind experiments with placebos is way better than our intuitions about what cures ailments, right? And so we shouldn't just say, well, this science and these other more recent forms of reasoning, they conflict with my bare intuition, so there must be something wrong with those other methods. I'm going to go back to my intuition. And I think
Mhm.
similarly in the moral case, when it involves very large numbers especially, or very low probabilities, we ought to say, like, this is not the kind of thing that our intuitions are equipped to deal with adequately.
Yeah.
We ought to use our numerate reasoning rather than our highly innumerate evolved intuitions.
For sure. I accept that my intuition could be wrong, and I definitely am with you on using reasoning. I just haven't been convinced by the reasoning I have heard, and I view most things as me either being convinced or not convinced. And I could be convinced and be wrong, or not convinced and be right. And yeah, time will tell. When we look at the what did you refer to it as, the cost risk analysis or whatever? It makes me think of this idea where, like, I would fight in the streets or in a war or whatever, to fight for people's rights, or something that I cared a lot about. I wouldn't sacrifice my life though. I would take the risk of dying to fight for them, but I wouldn't just press a button that ended me and made this cause I care about um um
When you take
officially covered, and that's how I view the risk thing you're talking about with the pool and all that. Is we can look at it, we can test it and go like, oh yeah, every year one person's going to drown, and if we were to do this, maybe they wouldn't or whatever. But I don't view that the same way I view a certain number of punches versus a lost arm. I view that similarly to, I would not sacrifice my own life, but I would risk my own life.
I think numbers of consequences or consequences for numbers of beings is just what probability looks like when it's scaled up. And you seem to have these two like distinct conceptual categories of like certain causation and then probabilistic causation. And I think that's a lot broader than ethics, but I think that it's more reasonable to think of, quote unquote 100% sure causation as just the limit of high probabilities. And then on a population level, when we say we know that a certain number of people are going to die in traffic accidents, that's just what the probabilities of individual people dying on individual days or individual moments just averaged out in a large population looks like. It looks like a very near certainty of a number within a certain range, right? And that's the kind of trade-offs that we make all the time, the status quo. And when you talk on an individual level about being willing to risk your life for something valuable but not sacrifice your life, I think most of the time when people do quote unquote sacrifice their lives, they're not like the main point of decision making falls short of 100%. At some point the rebel has to end up walking to the gallows or whatever, but that's not really when the choice is being made. Usually they're taking some political act and they know that they're being caught and executed is likely, but it's not 100%, and then we look at that and we call it knowing sacrifice, but it was really a risk with, maybe like a 70% chance of death, but there's always this chance of very strong success that underlied it. And the cases where somebody is, and then there are like soldiers diving on grenades, but I kind of think that the best analysis of that is that decisions were being made like during their training, and they were making decisions during their mental preparation in some sense. And those are like the more important like level of decision making, right? When they're training their reaction, and at that point there's a probability that they'll see the grenade first or something. It's not 100%. And then when the diving on the grenade happens, it's like the result of this internal kind of like habit formation in imagination that trained their brain to do it, as opposed to like a considered decision to sacrifice their life in that moment with 100% certainty. Is more of much more relevant is the conscious and subconscious, but the preparation, which is probabilistic. Because there are a lot of soldiers, not all of them, of course. I don't know what percentage. It's probably a minority that are actually like thoroughly like prepared to jump on a grenade, but then only some small percentage of them ends up having that situation occur and doing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, I gotta pause you real quick because I have to pee really bad. So
Okay.
I'll be right back. Sorry. All right, I'm back. I imagined that we'd be done soon enough that I could hold it, and I realized that I couldn't. But yeah, I probably got about 5 or so minutes to wrap this up. Yeah, I really enjoyed this talk.
Yeah. So yeah, when it comes to these issues, I mean that the broader point, I think, that encompasses both of these issues and a lot of others is that I think that the way we ought to approach morality is not by just cataloging a whole bunch of our individual like emotional reactions to cases and then saying this is just how I feel about all of these things and making generalizations over those, but we ought to be using our reason and subjecting it to the reasoning powers of others to construct something that goes actually far beyond our evolved mammalian moral intuitions or like basic like moral emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that I mean that's the overall arching principle that I think distinguishes a lot of my views from a lot of other people's views. But there are plenty of other people who are generally like me. And again, in terms of mentioning the status quo bias, I think that our wonderful societies, the wonderful aspects of our societies, are largely built upon people making these enlightened trade-offs that if you presented them as thought experiments with the same kind of structure, like people would intuitively reject them. But we like living in a society that uses them. Once it's the status quo, people look at these things and they say, "Oh yeah, that's," or they don't question it anymore. They see how good it is. And status quo bias is like our main enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah, I
causes
mean,
people to
I
explicitly
understand.
reject. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I understand the idea of status quo bias, and I think that does affect us. It probably affects me. I don't see that as affecting me here exactly, but this does make me curious. If you get the exact number of arm punched people that matches the suffering, so not like having it be a little more or whatever, it's just the exact amount of numerical suffering. Is it just a toss up for you? Would it be a flip of the coin, or is it that if you go a certain amount, a certain percentage over?
Well, I mean, there has to be, almost by definition, there has to be some point where it's going to be a flip of a coin, right? Because if there's the number where, like two punches in the arm versus one arm cut off, obviously one arm cut off is much worse.
Mhm.
And then a Googleplex, obviously Googleplex punches in the arm are much worse than one arm being cut off. And those curves they're like gonna intersect somewhere, right?
I don't, not for me. It sounds like it does for you, but
Wait,
I don't.
Carson, they're gonna intersect. I mean, well, okay. So then they're never gonna intersect, and then
The
I think it's
numerical
just straight
value
up.
of suffering will intersect. The idea of it being a flip of the coin will never intersect for me.
If there's a point where the one kind of situation is worse than the other, and then there's a point where the second is worse than the first.
So numerically, like the amount of suffering, you can reach it at whatever number. It doesn't matter if it's 8 billion or a trillion or whatever. That'll be where the suffering is equal.
Yeah.
I don't think you can pick a number for me where I would take the arm over a number of punches, even if you went for the rest of history or the rest of future humans, every human on Earth for the rest of time. That
Yeah.
number, I will need to be convinced of that, and I'm
So
so far from
again,
convinced
I
of
mean,
that.
it's
But
just
I'm just curious, like
it just
if
seems to me in numeracy like a total lack of appreciation for how large numbers can get,
Mhm.
and then also status quo bias because you are making trade-offs that involve similarly disparate things,
Mhm.
horrible outcomes with much lower probability or happening to fewer people, much less bad outcomes happening to many people or with a high frequency, but with much smaller numbers in the ratio than the numbers you're talking about now and just throwing out.
Mhm.
Your status quo, your daily decisions about yourself, about your family members, about your other acquaintances, and about humans you don't know, and about non-human animals, like
Yep.
just the way you conduct your life is making trade-offs that involve some number assigned to very terrible outcomes,
Mhm.
and the ratio is a much smaller ratio, much like closer ratio than the ratios you're saying right now you would never accept.
I think I would never accept them, and also we can
But you
bake into
do
the
accept them.
hypothetical.
That's what I'm saying. You
Well,
do
I don't
accept them
agree. We
because
can
you're
bake it.
functioning in society as a normal person and normal
Mhm.
people. You make those trade-offs. You're
I just don't
taking
agree.
risk of catastrophically bad things happening to
Mhm.
your family uh, with low probability every single day.
I completely agree with that. Yes, but I
Yeah.
don't agree in this other scenario. And also, we can just bake it into the hypothetical, however makes us both satisfied, to where I like if we just have it be where we're only referring to humans like me, humans that feel the amount of pain I have, and we get it into the trillions or whatever, and we we make sure that the pain is lasting 5 minutes, and that we're talking about humans that will have another 50 years or whatever amount of years of life, and we can factor all these things into it, and no matter what the numerical value of suffering, we can match it to the loss of an arm. And it's insane to me that you would ever have a level of flipping a coin. But I guess the thing I'm curious about is the flipping a coin when that numerical value is tied, or do you factor in the fact that we're talking about an individual's suffering versus multiple individual suffering?
This is what I'm saying about curves crossing. If we said, okay, at the point where the total sum of suffering is equal,
Mhm.
if I were to say at that point, I would say that I would find it preferable for many people to have the low level of suffering than for the one person to have the high level.
Mhm.
Then you could just go a little bit further down the curve,
Mhm.
and at some point you're going to find the place where I ought to be indifferent between the two.
Okay.
So there's going
I'm
to be
glad of that.
right. There's going to be a flip the coin point. It's just like if you just said on a selfish level, you said like how how much do you value like the eating a strawberry, and then how much do you value like spending a night with like the beautiful woman who you're in love with or whatever. And
Mhm.
then like I don't know, but if there's a million strawberry experiences that add up to more value than one night, like one extra night, and then obviously like the one night is more valuable than one strawberry experience, then at some point between that million and that or billion and one, there's some point where this one is going to cross this one, right? And
I
I
view pleasure so much differently than I view suffering that I can't even comprehend how to look at this. Sorry, I just my brain doesn't do that. Suffering means so much more to me than pleasure as far as like my caring level. Anyway, I just want to let you know because I was trying to follow what you're saying and I just don't think I can compare it. Do you think that there is a thing that could exist that would make me right? Like for example, if you think of something that you'd view as a discomfort at all, so like the speck of dust, there's probably something even less of an issue that is that would be on the level of a negative, but just the most barely negative you could imagine. And let's imagine it would just be like me just barely tapping you like do but to the point where you could call it something like a discomfort, but it's the most minimal discomfort ever. Do you think in that case where you have literally what, let's just say, an average of what every human on earth would call the most minimal discomfort ever, that you could reach a number of humans that could feel that for 1 second? Like Googleplex, the most wildest number, or infinite for all of the future imagining humans will always exist. If you pressed a button to make that extra amount happen than normally would have versus something like losing an arm, am I right
of
about
course
that?
that's just either appreciation or complete failure to appreciate what those numbers are, how large those
I
numbers
don't
are.
I just don't think
It's
so.
innumeracy. It's just ridiculous,
I think
like
you're failing
utterly
to
irrational
recognize
innumeracy.
how
No,
unimportant a tap like that is. And
you're
I'm
not
the one that thinks
understanding
people
that.
should go to jail for touching on the shoulder. You should be on my side here.
I mean, somebody who says that one lost arm is like worse than any number up to like Googleplex
Mhm.
uh, of dust specks or something like that. They are just not even like they're just like shutting off their mind
Mhm.
to any sort of appreciation that Googleplex is just so staggeringly vaster than the number of particles in the entire universe.
I'm with you that it's very likely that I can't fathom numbers in the way that I should if I was able to fathom all of them. I'm with you on that. And I'm also with you on that I could recognize at some point that I'm wrong. I just like it is so insignificant, the idea, and even less than the speck of dust, something that we would have to
Yeah.
recognize as
What
an
you know
inconvenience.
what's really insignificant? You know what's
Mhm.
way, way, way more insignificant than a dust speck?
What?
The frequency 1 over a googolplex. That's zero. That's any decision making ever. That's equivalent to 0. And that's how it should be treated.
I'm not sure if I quite follow.
So the difference between 1 and a googolplex
Mhm.
is so large
Mhm.
that compared to a googolplex of anything that's bad at all, 1 lost arm is 0.
Yeah, I
0
just
lost arm.
right.
And not appreciating that is not grappling with what that size of number is.
Yeah, and I would like to be convinced if I
It's
ever
going
could
with
be
your what it
convinced.
is
Yeah.
is it's going with your intuition
Okay.
that's implicitly treating googolplex as if it's something that if you saw a lot of it would be big, like 1,000. It's treating a googolplex as if it's like 1,000. It's
Yeah.
not like 1,000.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna let you know, and this might sound crazy. This doesn't sound crazy to me, but it might sound crazy to you. If there was a button that you could press to make somebody lose their arm, or a button that you could press to make somebody have the googolplex tapping or whatever thing, and then like in your case, so you're saying you'd press the button to lose the arm, and I'd press the button to do the googolplex. Not only would I hold on really quick, not only would I press the button to do the googolplex, even if I was told, okay, you're in luck, you don't have to press either. And then I was like eating a sandwich and I saw somebody going to press the googolplex one, and I could stop them or I could just eat my sandwich. I would just eat my sandwich.
You don't even understand what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
You're not grappling with
right.
the spot. No, you're not. You're not grappling with the size of the number. You're not. You're going with an intuition that is blocking you off from any attempt to grapple with the staggering size of the number. This number is so staggeringly a Google is much more than the number of atoms in the entire observable universe. A googolplex is 10 to the power of a Google. It is so staggeringly larger than the number of atoms in all the galaxies in the universe that being uncomfortably tapped on the shoulder a googolplex times is a Christian depiction of hell. It's
I just want to make sure we're understanding what we're saying.
Tortured for eternity.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
You're saying that you would prefer torturing somebody in the Christian torture for eternity over one person having an arm amputated, which happens in the real world and which we accept as a trade-off for all sorts of things all the time.
Nope, that is not what I'm saying. If I could press a button to have one person have their arm amputated or one person be uncomfortably touched a googolplex amount of times, I would take that arm any day of the week, every time. The idea of having every individual that I could possibly even imagine, I don't even care. Even if it wasn't compared to the two, if I could press a button and have all 8 billion people on Earth right now, even if the numbers doesn't add up to anything or we're not even comparing to anything, just to press it for fun, I don't even view that as like I'm doing a villainous thing.
That might
Because
be compatible. That might be compatible with the size of a number like a googolplex. If the premise is that the total life that involved that one uncomfortable tap on the shoulder, it didn't make that tap on the shoulder didn't make the life worse. Like
yeah,
it could, if it made the overall valence of the life unchanged or even positive, like I don't know, somehow you were thinking that like people learned and grew from this tap on the shoulder or something, then
yeah.
yeah, then a single tap on the shoulder, if it doesn't make the life worse at all, then sure, then the math of multiplying by a googolplex doesn't apply anymore, right? Then you're multiplying 0 times a googolplex, which is 0.
Well, that's why I was saying if we took it down to something that we must call an inconvenience, but it's even less of a deal than the spec. Because I wanted to take it to the, what is it? A reductio. I wanted to take it to the most absurd thing that you should have to contend with. And if you don't contend with that one, then we take it up a tiniest notch. And at some point you have to contend. Now, I would think that even the speck of dust doesn't matter, but you would think the speck of dust matters. But I'm curious if there's something in between this tap, which I don't even know if I call that an inconvenience, maybe a little bit.
Well, yeah, if it's not an inconvenience, if it
Yeah.
has 0 valence, or if
So
it has somehow positive valence, then
yes,
the argument doesn't hold up anymore, right?
right. So, but something between that and a speck of dust, there's going to be something you're going to land on. And I would say if a speck of dust is like, I'm sure you get specks of dust in your eye here and there all the time. You got to blink it out and it hurts. It's a pain in the butt. There's got to be other things that are a pain in the butt, but less. But even taking that, the idea of obviously I wouldn't do it over and over and over, but one time only ever making every human who has ever existed get an extra 5 minutes of a feeling of a speck of dust in their eye versus somebody losing an arm. Like, get an extra speck of dust in your eye. Like, I don't care if I get an extra speck of dust in my eye. If I know that feeling for me and every other individual getting that exact same feeling would be like removed by the sacrifice of somebody's arm, I would think anybody that would think to do that has got to be a complete asshole or they just don't understand what they're saying. Now, again, I might be stupid with numbers and wrong about this, but
no, I mean, you're not even, it's more like you're not even trying in good faith. Then it's less like you're stupid about numbers, bad at math, and it's more like you're not even trying to hold your moral instinctual emotions to the fire of the math, because it seemed like right now you're sort of allowing your intuitions to conflate somebody who would choose to have one person lose their arm to have like everyone on Earth or some vastly larger number than everyone on Earth, have a dust speck or get punched. We talked about punch in the arm. It's like you're letting your emotions like hear that comparison of one amputated arm versus everyone on Earth like bruised in the arm. And then your mind, part of your brain is intuiting one person getting punched in the arm versus one person having their amputated arm. And you're thinking, if I said, in order to prevent myself from getting punched in the arm, I would let you get your arm amputated. Yes, I would be a total piece of shit.
And that's how I view this entire conversation. Correct. And I could be wrong about it.
But that's not so if you're allowing your like intuitions to conflate the two or to like flip between the two questions of one person amputated arm versus everybody on Earth having a bruised arm versus the 1-to-1, then there's just like this false equivocation going on, and you're allowing the emotion that properly attends to making the bad one-to-one trade-off of letting somebody have their arm cut off to avoid being punched in my arm, which indeed makes somebody a total piece of shit, with a very different question. It's like
So are you saying that
implicitly treating 8 billion as the same as 1.
So are you saying that you think morally every one of the Googleplex people should say, like, I don't want this person's arm off to sacrifice for all of our specs, but them individually saying it shouldn't affect a knowledge that the overall it's for the better good?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. It depends on, yeah, I mean, I think morally relevant choices are ones where the individual can affect the outcome, right? So if like is the idea that every single one of these people has agreed to accept the dust spec, but it needs to be unanimous, so now it's up to me.
Yeah, do you think they wouldn't?
So that if every single one of this staggeringly large number of agents have made the choice to accept the dust spec on this needing to be unanimous vote, and then I was the last one to cast my vote, then that would be morally identical to the one-to-one trade-off, because I would be in a position to know that I would be either through my individual choice, knowing that the other people have already had their like dust specs or whatever, I would be choosing between, or their punch in the arm, I would be choosing between my punch in the arm or this other person's.
Okay, I got it then. I got it. So how about this? Okay, so there's a Googleplex of people that could get the we'll stick with the something like a hard enough tap to call it, less bad than the spec, but still we're looking at a minimal inconvenience. Okay, so Googleplex of people could get that, or somebody loses their arm, but we're gonna let every one of the Googleplex people decide if they're up for getting that, or if they'd rather the person lose their arm for the Googleplex amount. And then for yourself, without knowing other people's choice, would you let yourself get the tap?
Well,
this one should be simple. Just for yourself. Like would you just say like
no, it's not. So if the vote was not unanimous, then the person would lose their arm. So I would think, well, there's got to be at least somebody who is, doesn't care, whatever, who's irrational.
I'm just saying, just for yourself, because I'll get to that part in like.
What does it mean, just seconds. For myself? What does that mean?
So, like, if somebody said to you, like, we're gonna ask everybody, and if everybody happens to not care about getting this inconvenience, then the person won't lose their arm. If anybody cares, then we won't, or whatever. But that you're just gonna answer for yourself. Are you willing to accept it? And then
this is then just a probability judgment that it's overwhelmingly likely to be the case that my choice won't make any difference.
Yeah, but why would you go out of your way to not say?
Of course, it would not be rational for me to accept being punched in the arm when I'm virtually certain that at least one of the other people has made that choice. Maybe because they didn't even understand the question or whatever.
Why go the other way around? Why not just say exactly what you just said, which is it's likely that one of these Googleplex will do it, but obviously I don't care if I get tapped. Why are you saying I will say that I won't get tapped instead of saying you will get tapped?
Well, because I would be accepting some additional negative to myself.
Oh no, there's no additional negative. It's just you're just saying if you're fine with getting that slight tap, or whatever the thing is. It could even be like this. Like watch me, ready? Like that actually kind of felt uncomfortable. So it's more of that. It's more of a one of those. You're just saying for yourself. Don't worry, you're not going to like lose a thing here. I'm just curious, like, because now that's a whole different conversation about if you won't accept that. I'm not sure what to think of you right now.
Well, you're not sure because you're not allowing your mind to even try to grapple with what a Googleplex is.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying
And
you
I'm
are
going to
one
keep
of the
saying
Google.
that.
I'm just saying you're one of the Googleplex. So I'm one of the Googleplex. You're one of the Googleplex, and it's a random stranger here that their arm might get cut off or
Yeah,
whatever.
and
And if they ask
Might
me,
Might is doing a lot of work there. Might is doing a lot of work there because one over a Googleplex in this conversation ought as well to be zero.
I'm with
It's
you on
zero.
that, but just for the sake of
That
conversation,
guy is not going to have his arm cut off. It's zero. Right?
Wait. No. Well, hold on. I'm just saying that if all the Googleplex people decide that they're okay with the thud on their head, if considering that if everybody agrees that the person won't get their arm cut off, like if somebody asked me, like, would you accept that versus that if everybody agrees they won't get their arm cut off, I go like, sure, yeah. I just did it to myself just talking to you right now. So clearly it's not the end of the world, but it's an inconvenience. I wouldn't want to feel it all the time. And then you're just being asked for you personally. And then I can get to the whole point that I'm getting at.
A Googleplex.
I'm not talking about a Googleplex. I'm asking about you.
You are.
No, I'm just asking you, Jeremy, if everybody's going to be asked, including you, and right now you're being asked, and
You
then
can't
I'll
just elide over over the size of a Googleplex.
I'm not,
because what you're trying to do, if it's just me versus doing this versus letting a person have their arm cut off, then in the 1-to-1 trade-off, I'd be a total piece of shit for not accepting the click.
Yes, correct. And it's not a 1-to-1, it's a Googleplex, and each of the
and
Googleplex
when we
people
consider
are gonna be asked.
Googleplex, a Googleplex of this is essentially infinite.
Yeah, I get it. If you ask a Googleplex of how many of them want to murder their mothers and cut their faces off and wear masks of them, you're going to get about, I don't know, a few million maybe. It's going to be like very rare. I don't know how much a million is compared to a Googleplex, but yes, you're right. There will be some people that'll go, no, let the arm go off. I'll take the flick.
Imagine doing this to every single atom in your body, every single millisecond for all of the milliseconds in time since the Big Bang, and it does not even scratch the surface of what a Googleplex is.
I agree with you, and that's fine, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking you if everybody in a group of a Googleplex was going to have to get that thing versus one person getting their arm cut off.
That's what you are talking about when you put the word Googleplex into your thought experiment.
But I'm not.
If you don't want it to be in there, then use a number. Use a number that you care about, like 100, and then I'll tell you that
I care about
people should flick their head instead of having somebody's arm cut off.
I care about the Googleplex. I'm sticking with the Googleplex. What I'm saying is, what I'm not talking about is the idea that it's a Googleplex amount of times happening to one individual. I'm saying it's a Googleplex amount of people. They're all here in the biggest pile ever that we can't imagine. And I'm going to have a podcast with all the Googleplex people, and I'm going to ask each of them if they're going to do it. All I'm asking you is for you personally. I don't get why you would even factor in the Googleplex. I'm just saying,
you're using it.
No. I'm saying just listen. This is very easy. This is simple. I can't even. I feel
it is simple, but you're giving the wrong action.
I feel like you're worried there's a gotcha, so you're jumping around it. I don't get it.
No,
if there is a Googleplex,
I'm not worried about a gotcha. I just hear what you're doing.
No. Then just answer it honestly. If there's a Googleplex amount of people, hold on real quick. If there's a Googleplex amount of people, and I'm going to ask every single one if they're cool with the thud on the head, it doesn't matter if some of them will go, nope, I don't care. I'm not going to do it. I'm asking you if you're going to do it. I'm doing this for a very specific reason.
It would be so staggeringly evil more evil than any evil that you're ever aware of happening in the world to have a Googleplex flicks on people's heads compared to one person's arm being cut off.
And that might
The
be true.
Googleplex of flicks is that much staggeringly evilly worse than the most evil things. And for you
I
to
don't get why
give the
you can't answer
opposite
the question.
answer,
I'm
what do you
sorry.
mean?
I love you. I just don't think you're for
What
some
is the
reason
question? Whether I would do it to myself or
if there was a Googleplex amount of people that they were going to get flicked in the head or somebody was going to get their arm cut off, but before
yes.
this decision was made, every member of that Googleplex that might get the flick was asked, would you take the flick if it meant that if everybody agreed to take it, this person would not lose their arm. So you're not choosing that everybody has to take it. You're just saying, will you take the flick? And then I will go and ask number 2, number 3, all the way up to a Googleplex. And so, we'll suspend time and space. So
if even one person says no, then nobody gets flicked.
But that doesn't matter. Correct? But that doesn't matter.
Sure it does.
Well, no, if you think that if all the Googleplex amount of people would accept the flick, if you think that that is still wrong and that they shouldn't get it, even if they say they want it,
So
then
for some
sure.
deontological reason.
Yeah, then sure, you could say, I would take the flick. But if that's not what you're stating, then I'm just curious about what you would choose for yourself when this question's presented to you. And I don't know why, but you haven't answered that question yet.
Yeah, I think I have. I think I have.
Would you take the flick? I'll even do it again to myself. I did it twice. I took it.
Yeah, I did it to myself too. I do it for nothing. It's inconsequential, but you didn't do it. You didn't do it a Googleplex times. You didn't even do it a billion times.
Yeah, that's correct. Only one time. One time for you, and then I'm going to ask the other Googleplex of people.
So
I got really something awesome that I want to get to, and I don't even know if I'll remember it, but this was the easy part.
I answered it. I answered
yes
it,
or
Carson.
no. What's the answer?
The answer is so I'm just going to say no because to trigger you, because you think the answer is obviously yes, but the actual answer is.
Can you say yes, and then I can ask my follow-up question? Because this should
the answer is that the difference between the two, the moral difference because of the consequential difference would be zero. Zero. There would be no difference. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to say
I get that you're saying it doesn't matter, but would you take a flick if that meant that if everybody else would take the flick, somebody would not lose their arm?
No.
That's outrageous.
The actual answer is that the difference between them is zero. It doesn't fucking matter one way or the other because it will not be the case that Googleplex people will all do the same thing. It will not happen.
Do you think it's accurate with the amount of like if you have an endless amount of time that every possible random thing that could happen will happen?
I mean, you're just not confronting how large numbers are.
Do you think it's that if with the right amount of time that there will be a time that there could be a Googleplex amount of people that would choose to take the flick?
No.
Oh, no.
It's staggeringly larger than all the particles in the universe and all the minimally measurable segments of time in the universe.
Okay. So let's say that you were to ask, let's say you were going to have a conversation with one of the Googleplex people, and then you asked them the same question. So I just asked you and you said, no, you won't take the flick. And then you ask somebody and they say they will take the flick. What do you talk to them about? What do you like? Let's say it's me and I say like, oh, I'll take the flick. What have I said that's wrong?
I would say there is 100% probability that this person will have their arm cut off. So my decision
I'd
has
say
0%, zero consequences either way on
Huh?
what happens to this person.
Oh, so you don't think somebody's wrong either way if they say they will take it or won't take it? It's just their answer just
Well,
doesn't matter.
they're wrong to exactly the same degree as somebody in our real world who increases the flicks by self-harm or other harm without the cutting off of the arm or anything else. The increased badness of flicking yourself is the same as it is in our world, where that's the only consequence, because that would be the only consequence.
Do you think if we could just suspend time and space and I talk to the Googleplex amount of people, and during every podcast I had with a Googleplex amount of people, if myself and them we're flicking ourselves while we talk about it, and then it turns out that all Googleplex people flick themselves more at least one time, and which makes it more times than they would have if none of those conversations
You're
happened.
just
If at that
you're
point we
trying to
shouldn't cut
do
the arm off.
you're trying to do moral intuitions
Mm-hmm.
with a number in the formulation that you are not trying to grapple with the magnitude of.
That's fair. I haven't even tried
You
to do
are
anything with
you
it.
are welcoming in the you're welcoming in the conflation of this staggeringly large number
Mm-hmm.
with a number that your moral emotions deal with. You're trying to draw out an intuitive moral judgment that, sure, I should say we're gonna have this social cohesion in our tribe, and we're gonna take this very small amount of effort and sacrifice to save a member of our tribe from this great harm. And that intuition is a great intuition, but that intuition operates on a scale of dozens or hundreds. It doesn't operate on the scale of a super large number that's just staggeringly larger than all the particles in the universe over all the moments in the universe.
And that's not what I was doing. You might have thought that, but that's not where I was going with it. But maybe we can fix that by changing the number. Would it change anything for you if we said 1 billion, or is that still too high of a number for me to comprehend? Because I don't mean that sarcastically, because it probably is.
There's no comparison between, like, the difference between 1 and 1 billion is nothing compared to the difference between 1 billion and a Googleplex. So it makes almost all of the difference. Now, whether
so if it was 1 billion people getting that versus one person losing just a pinky, not a whole arm, just a pinky. Okay,
I mean,
so then
I already compared a hard punch in the arm for everybody on Earth.
Yeah.
As worse than one amputated arm.
There we go. So if I were to ask you, would you accept the hard punch in the arm if it meant if everybody else on Earth, not Googleplex, said that they would accept it, would you personally accept it?
And then
everybody else would get asked. Yeah.
So crucially, if at least one person says no, then nobody gets punched in the arm.
Correct.
Not I get punched in the arm regardless. So only upon a unanimous vote.
Does that change it?
I would still say, the important factor is not the deontological quote unquote consent. The important factor is that a hard punch in the arm is more than 1 billionth or more than 1/8 billionth as bad as an amputated arm is. So I would want to prevent everybody on Earth from having a hard punch that leaves a bruise in their arm,
even if they were okay with it.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Interesting.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's what being a consequentialist is. I mean, like the consent is like an indication of
Yeah, that's the only reason my stance is what it is because my assumption of the consent. I don't
I
hold this
mean,
stance without assumption of consent.
if you could somehow convince me that like the reason that almost all of my fellow humans on earth were agreeing to this is that they found it either pleasurable or it gave their lives some kind of positive value that outweighs the
Yeah, a positive
pain.
value that they saved the person's arm. That
Okay. So so this is very different now. Okay, because now you're not just talking about first level
no,
trade off.
fair point. Okay, right. I don't want to bring that in. They don't
Now
get
you're
it.
now you're
Nobody
talking
gets to know
about
the outcome.
yeah
You're right.
yeah
You're right.
sure
Nobody gets to know
of
the outcome.
course yeah of course it could be net positive for everybody to have the experience of a little bit of suffering. You know, in high school football, they like to say something like pain is temporary and pride is forever or whatever, right?
Hmm?
You're going to get beat up in your homecoming game, but then afterwards, you're going to have the memory for the rest of your life of how you won the homecoming game.
Yeah. And so
And,
I just
and
extend
that's going to
that
be a
amongst
higher.
multiple people of
Okay, great.
pain is temporary and amputation is forever. And sure,
Well,
we're
no.
looking
So,
at different
but what you're saying
people.
now is what you're saying now. If people are going to know that, hey, we voted, and then the we say we know who this person is and we save their arm,
Yeah, no,
then
I'm removing all that because of course, yes. So
right.
that changes things. So not only will they not know the answer, but 5 minutes later they will forgot they were ever asked the question. So yeah, no outcome of the person's arm being saved and their how happy they get to be gets to have any connection to it or any of that stuff. It's just the idea of being asked if and the punch in the arms kind of tricky too. Well, anyways, 5 minutes of pain, no bruise, 5 minutes of pain of like a pretty hard punch or whatever. If everybody agrees not to get the punch, the person saved, but nobody gets to know the outcome, any of that stuff, then the question is just like, would you take that pain um to let somebody not get their arm cut off?
I mean, this is to me the same question. It's this would you question.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if I can predict my psychology in this strange hypothetical, but if it's the question, is it a morally better choice? Then it's the same question as the question, are 8 billion punches worse than one amputated arm, or is one amputated arm worse than 8 billion punches? And when I answer the question that I think probably the 8 billion punches is a worse consequence,
Mm-hmm.
then the answer to that is the exact same answer as
Okay.
would it be
If everybody
morally better for me to agree or not agree.
Okay, if everybody was asked, and let's say basically everybody, 8 billion people, if everybody is asked and basically everybody says that they would accept the punch versus somebody losing their arm, would you then assume that you just did the math wrong?
No. That's
I
interesting because
to me that feels
there's
like
going
an
to be a
easy
lot
way
of
out because it would
there's
make
going to
you
be a lot of
potentially right with higher numbers, but that you did the math wrong. But sorry, go on.
yeah, I understood. There're going to be a lot of mathematically literate consequentialists among all the people on Earth, and they would have had to unanimously agree, along with all the innumerate and confused people, right? So, just even if I thought that, like, the number of people that I thought were like clearly like highly numerate and like on a firm ethical foundation, it would still be like 10,000, maybe 100,000 people. And for all of those people to be making that unanimous judgment, yeah, sure. Just the fact of of unanimous judgment on basically anything
Mhm.
is pretty overwhelming evidence that I must be seriously confused about some
Well,
aspect of the
what
situation,
but
right?
here's the thing. If it's 1 to 1 or 1,000,000,000 to 1, the individual answer wouldn't be different. It'd be different if you were talking about how you don't want this overall suffering to happen, but to the individual, it wouldn't be different. So if somebody told me it's up to you, one person, either you take this punch and they don't lose an arm, or you don't take the punch and they do lose the arm, then I answer that however I answer that. If 8 billion people had the same situation where you all get punched and whatever, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters about them all getting punched would be a thought process that any of us humans could have, that all that suffering added together is bad. But to each individual getting the suffering and they're just figuring out if they will personally take the suffering, it's the same as the 1 to 1.
I see what you're saying. This is sort of like this is a kind of mathematical like paradox of cause. This is going to take a lot more time to explain, but I would say it can't simultaneously be the case that each of the 8 billion people is making the 1 to 1 choice. It could be the case for any given one of them that
Mhm.
the others have their decision fixed, so to speak, and that one remaining person is making a 1 to 1 trade-off.
Mhm.
But it can't simultaneously be the case that all of them are making the 1 to 1 trade-off. Those numbers
True.
don't add up, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, here, imagine this. Imagine all 8 billion, they get to feel the punch. So in case they're wrong about their calculation of what the pain will feel like. So we make all 8 billion feel the pain. And then I tell them, because I'm the all-knowing God and whatnot. I tell 8 billion people that pain that I just made you all feel, I'm doing this one time only. This will never happen again. I'm going to, if each of you agree to get that same pain again, so it's going to actually be double the pain, but the one already happened and they can't go back on it, but now they know what it feels like. If you accept that you will take the pain, if everybody accepts it, this one person won't lose their arm. If anybody doesn't, then they'll lose their arm or whatever. I guess I'll get to it, assuming that I won't get the answer I want from you. If you were to say that yes, you would take it even though you assume somebody else won't, therefore whatever. If you do accept it, my question to you would be that, like, let's say 95% of people accept it, or 99 or whatever, and then you were going to have a conversation with one of the people that don't accept it personally for themselves. I'm trying to figure out how you would view that individual. That's the question I meant to ask you like a half hour ago, if you were to have answered the question how I thought you were going to answer it.
In the
And you never
numerically
did.
stupid way. I mean, and I know the kind of thing that you're trying to get at. It's like,
I want you to admit that you would
look at all
consider
of
that
us.
person an immoral person.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Just do it, and then we can say Carson's right, and then we're out of here.
No, because this is we're going to go back to the main point that you are acting innumerately and not seriously confronting what the size of different numbers means. Even when we're talking about 8 billion and not super large numbers like Googleplex. What you want me to say, I totally have these kind of primate intuitions. They're important. I use them in my life. I understand what you want me to say. What you want me to say, and I don't disagree with having this kind of emotion. I have it all the time. I use it in my life. It's valid much of the time. You want me to say something like, hey, look at all of us making this really small sacrifice to work together to achieve this lofty goal of saving this person's arm, and here you are, and you won't even do this little thing, and it's all because of you. How much of a you know selfish little and cowardly non defector you have to be to tear this whole thing down, all this amazing effort that all these other people I mean, not even amazing effort, but just this social solidarity involving small amount of effort from so many other people, and you wouldn't even do that.
Yeah, we're finally on the same page. I like this.
No, we're not on the same page.
I'm just kidding.
And the reason we're not on the same page is because I very clearly recognize that sort of sentiment is based upon being in a tribe, being in like a clan of 20 to maybe 100 people. And that's where it's appropriate. And it's not appropriate scaled up to a number like 8 billion. And that's very, very crucial.
Okay.
It's not something that you just gloss over by saying the number and saying, oh, let's change it from 20 to 8 billion now, right? Numbers are important. And when your intuitive reaction kind of reacts the same way to describing a situation with 100 people in a room, in a large ballroom versus every human on earth. And when your emotions give roughly the same response, that is an indication that your emotions are not appropriate to the judgment at hand. Right?
Okay.
So that social moral reaction that you wanted to lead me to, I have no problem accepting when it's tied to the scope that it's appropriate for.
Yeah, I think in reality you would judge the individuals, but I don't know. I don't know. It's complicated. I don't think you're lying. I just I think if it played out, my guess is that it would look different. But I also don't know if we like scaled it differently. If we took the total pain of punching at 1,000 people, because you're right about the clans. If we take 1,000 people, punch them in the shoulder, and then we do the math and we see what that pain is. If we come up with like a permanent pain that could happen to one person, that would be the equivalent of 1,000 punches to the arm. I don't know if I would hold the same kind of stance, because the argument I'm trying to make is, again, I'm trying to do a reductio here, and I don't know if I can do a reductio with 1,000 punches in the arm. But if 1,000 punches in the arm was equivalent to losing a pinky or losing the top from knuckle up at the pinky or whatever, then I guess I would just have that question there where I go, okay, 1,000 is like a reasonable tribe. There were tribes of Native Americans that were 1,000 is plenty for a tribe. It's not too large. It's not too small. And if you asked each individual about a punch in the arm versus one individual that they'll never even meet, just somebody on the other side of the planet, like, would you each take a quick punch in the arm? You're going to feel it for 5 minutes. You might get slight bruising and you're going to forget it ever happened tomorrow. Or somebody's going to lose this little piece of their finger. It's not going to be the end of the world. They can still grip things. They can still do all the normal hand things. You better believe that if one of those 1,000 say they won't take the punch in the arm, I'm going to have a stern talking to them, even if the numbers of suffering are equal, or even if the number of punch in the arm suffering is double. Do you see a difference here?
Well, I mean, 1,000 is very different from 8 billion, but I still think that what you're doing is you're throwing around the numbers casually, and they're just vocalizations. They're just like some kind of abstraction to you.
Yeah, a collection of individuals. I think a lot of people, when they look at these things, they ignore that each individual feels the amount of suffering they feel.
caring about the numbers, caring about the size of numbers is the way that you care about each individual. Ignoring the size of numbers, glossing over the differences between sizes of numbers is precisely the opposite of caring about each individual. It's ignoring how many individuals there are. It's ignoring the value of each individual by ignoring the number.
Mm.
When you, I think that what you're doing is just the number is just kind of like words, or like it activates something like very peripherally, but everything other than the number is important in producing your judgment. And so, okay, well, we can just casually change the number. How about if it's this number? How about it's this number? That's not appropriately, you're not appropriately grappling with what it means to have drownings in pools if you're just throwing out, well, it could be 20, it could be 2,000, it could be 2 billion, right? You need to fully engage with the numbers that are involved in any moral issue
Mhm.
in order to be doing justice to the consequences for the beings involved.
Yeah, do you think the 1,000 works here? So you have 1,000 that get punched in the arm, 5 minutes of pain, compared to one person, just the top knuckle, pinky gone. Do you think those are do you think it's possible that those are reasonably comparable?
It's possible
Which
gets
direction do you think it might not be?
maybe close to the overlap point, I think.
Which one do you think's overlapping, though?
Probably, well, overlapping means that, what I mean by overlapping is that they might, like, the reasonable ranges of judgment might overlap, so that
Oh, okay. I thought you were
there might
saying
be some
that like one
disagreement.
side might be a little higher than the other, overlapping in that sense. But I see. And then we can even take it further than that. But let's say that that's reasonable. And if you don't find that reasonable, I would say it's reasonable to call 5,000 people a tribe. So then if we take 5,000 punches versus one person's knuckle to whatever. So like ignoring the idea of my inability to look at Googleplexes or billions or whatever, if I had one-on-one talks with these 5,000 people and they could each take the punch in the arm, do you feel like even if we had the equivalent suffering, of the 5,000 punches in the arm versus what little nothingness this loss of thing would do? Because I'm trying to look at something that's minimal but happening to a lot of people versus something that's permanent, even if it's as simple as just losing this tiny amount of the pinky. But it's important that they are equivalent in suffering, that it's just there's so much more to the idea of an individual experiencing a lot versus a lot of people experiencing very little, like very little, to the point where even a punch in the arm that is way worse than the flick or the speck of dust is going to mean nothing the next day.
Mhm.
Is it at least different in this case where we're not looking at the
But
Googleplexes that I'm not pondering?
see, then there's this is, yeah, we got to wind this down because this is a
Yeah, I
totally
know it's your
different issue.
bedtime.
But
Yeah.
this goes to the issue when you're talking about valence states, pleasures, pains, whether you're using a definitional kind of sense of the term, where what it means for the total suffering to be equal just
Mhm.
is that it's the coin flip choice between the two, right? And if that's definitionally what you mean by the equality of suffering, just terminologically, then just no question there, right? And then, but then there could also be some kind of independent, maybe like brain state related definition of suffering being equal, and then you can make a contentful claim upon that of which situation is preferable to the other. Um,
Mm.
but that's a lot harder to do. And what the real issue that I have is when people are equivocating between the two, right? So in the process of defining the suffering being equal, they're kind of they're relying upon the definitional kind of equivalence. And if you consistently stuck with that definitional equivalence, then you just have your answer. Like what it
Mm.
means for the suffering to be equal just is that it's a coin flip between the two.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is, that's what the coin flip is. But then when you start to move beyond that and you start to say, well, even though the suffering is equal, we should prefer the smaller suffering distributed among more than the greater suffering among the fewer. That starts to look like you're using you have to be using something different, a different concept of suffering other than the definitional equivalence one. But you set the problem up seeming to be using the definitional
I might be doing that on
sense of
accident because I might be doing that on accident because what I'm looking at is like what we could imagine as total suffering in two separate cases, and that's just the total number of suffering. But those could be equal, and I could view one as a billion times better a thing to do than another thing, even though those are equal. So yeah, this might be a strange definition thing.
All right. This is pretty close pretty close to 90 minutes, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Within the scale of Googleplex.
Right.
90 minutes and 195 minutes are pretty close.
Yeah. But yeah, let's in the future let's have another conversation on this definition thing, because that might fix this up so simply, and then we'd both agree on almost everything we're talking about. Like seriously, it might. Yeah.
But
But anyways,
some people will watch this. We can at least mine this for some good timestamps and some people to watch those useful clips. I don't know. Yeah, it's been great talking to you though.
Yeah.
But I need to get my first sleep of the year.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you have a good night. It's good talking to you.
Happy New Year, man.
Bye.
Good night.